when the narcissist loses everything and is forced to start over from scratch. To truly understand the aftermath of a narcissistic relationship, you must first recognize the profound difference between wisdom and manipulation. For the survivor, wisdom is born from reflection, education, and lived experience. It is the accumulation of insight over time as you confront the ways narcissism affected your life. Psychologists define this as the development of self-awareness and emotional resilience, a process that allows you to map the patterns, understand the triggers, and ultimately regain agency over your own life. In stark contrast, the narcissist is devoid of this capacity for growth. They possess no genuine wisdom, no authentic self-reflection, and no internal compass for morality. All they have is a repertoire of manipulative techniques, endlessly repeated, like spinning in a void where nothing ever changes. When a narcissist loses a source of supply, someone who provided them with attention, admiration, or emotional energy, they are forced to start over. This is not a trivial process. Psychologists emphasize that forming these manipulative relationships requires energy, planning, and performance. Each new target represents a blank slate, a puzzle to be manipulated, groomed, and controlled, all to replicate the supply they once extracted from you. Meanwhile, you, the survivor, are in a completely different space. You are healing. You are ascending, evolving, and reclaiming the power that was once siphoned from you. You are no longer trapped in the low-vibrational, oppressive dynamic of the narcissist. You are no longer silenced, gaslit, or controlled. You are learning to focus on what you can control: your thoughts, your emotions, and your boundaries. Psychologists often describe this stage as post-traumatic growth, a profound transformation that occurs after surviving prolonged relational trauma. It is crucial to understand that the narcissist does not experience this freedom. When they must start over, they face the exhausting and relentless task of reconstructing a facade of charm, confidence, and utility for each new target. The process of constantly reinventing themselves, creating new narratives, and managing multiple manipulations is psychologically draining. Experts in personality disorders note that the cognitive load of maintaining these illusions is immense because they lack authentic selfhood. They cannot simply act naturally, they must act. Every new mask must be rehearsed, every story carefully aligned to avoid contradiction, and every previous source of supply erased to prevent exposure. This is why narcissists often erase the past, rewrite history, and refuse accountability. They cannot integrate their actions into a coherent, truthful narrative without shattering the fragile construct of self they cling to. Narcissists are loyal to no one. They are incapable of authentic attachment or empathy. Their needs are singular: to matter to someone, to extract energy, admiration, and validation, and to maintain a sense of superiority over others. Psychologists explain that narcissistic attachment is inherently utilitarian. Relationships are evaluated not for mutual connection, but for what can be extracted from the other person. This is why survivors often experience the paradox of feeling utterly betrayed by someone who appeared deeply invested. The narcissist is never invested in you. They are invested in what you provide. When a narcissist identifies a new target, they are scanning for vulnerability, availability, and value, whether that is emotional fragility, youth, vitality, financial resources, or social status. Psychologists describe this as the predatory phase of narcissistic behavior. They meticulously assess who can provide the highest return for the least investment. For example, a recently divorced individual may be emotionally available and seeking intimacy, or an older person who has lost a spouse may have financial assets and loneliness. Both scenarios present opportunities for exploitation. The narcissist approaches with charm, feigned interest, and strategic emotional engagement, while carefully ensuring they give nothing of real substance in return. Their interactions are performative, calculated, and ultimately extractive. For survivors, understanding this pattern is both liberating and essential. Psychologists emphasize that recognizing the narcissist's need for constant supply allows you to disengage without guilt or second-guessing. You no longer need to wonder why you were drained, manipulated, or devalued. The answer lies in their pathology, not your worth. By internalizing the truth that narcissists take without giving, manipulate without remorse, and recycle their tactics endlessly, you reclaim your power. You can cultivate boundaries, reinforce self-respect, and refuse participation in their cycle of exploitation. This awareness also highlights an important psychological contrast. While the narcissist must constantly strategize, rehearse, and manipulate to feel alive, the survivor has the opportunity to live authentically, with freedom, stability, and growth. Whereas the narcissist's world is a never-ending cycle of performance and erasure, the survivor's world can be grounded in truth, agency, and resilience. The longer you stay in this post-narcissistic state of awareness, the clearer it becomes that your value is inherent, not contingent upon someone else's approval or exploitation. Recognizing this dynamic is not just empowering. It is transformative, allowing you to finally live without fear, guilt, or manipulation, and to thrive in ways the narcissist could never comprehend. One of the most insidious aspects of narcissistic abuse is how thoroughly it can destabilize your sense of reality, leaving you trapped in a labyrinth of what ifs, wondering how you could have fallen for the mask, why you didn't trust your instincts, or why the red flags were invisible to you at the time. Psychologists describe this phenomenon as cognitive dissonance combined with trauma bonding. Your mind struggles to reconcile the charming persona you once adored with the manipulation and exploitation you endured. It is natural and tragically common for survivors to replay these moments endlessly, analyzing every gesture, every lie, every future promise that never materialized, as though by doing so, the pieces might finally fit. This obsessive mental loop can feel suffocating, but it is also a key step toward developing what psychologists call post-traumatic insight. The understanding that your experience, while painful, is a source of clarity and eventual empowerment. Meanwhile, the narcissist is operating in an entirely different psychological space. Every time they lose a source of supply, someone who provided attention, validation, or emotional energy, they are forced to start over. Unlike the survivor, who has the opportunity to grow, heal, and cultivate self-awareness, the narcissist is trapped in a perpetual cycle of deception and performance. They must craft new narratives, groom new targets, and carefully manage multiple manipulations simultaneously. Psychologists note that this constant need to perform is exhausting, even for the narcissist, because it requires them to sustain illusions of competence, charm, and superiority without the stabilizing force of authentic selfhood. Every new target is an opportunity, but also a challenge. Can they maintain the facade long enough to extract what they need? This relentless cycle explains why narcissists often seem restless, perpetually on their phones, juggling multiple devices, and tracking multiple relationships. Their behavior is a manifestation of what psychologists call supply-seeking behavior, a compulsive drive to maintain sources of emotional, social, or financial fuel. Unlike the survivor, whose growth comes from reflection, self-care, and introspection, the narcissist's existence revolves around constant monitoring and calculation. They analyze who remains tethered to them, who is vulnerable, who has not healed, and how to reintegrate those individuals into a foggy, controlled interaction that benefits the narcissist alone. This is why, after a breakup, the narcissist may engage in what is often called hoovering, attempting to pull someone back into the relationship even if it has ended. Psychologists explain that this is not about reconciliation or care. It is about resource reclamation. Within the relationship itself, these dynamics often manifest as micro-discards and macro-discards. A micro-discard might be missing your birthday, failing to show up for a meaningful event, withholding emotional support, or subtly undermining your achievements. Psychologists highlight that micro-discards serve a dual purpose. They destabilize the target emotionally, keeping them off balance, while subtly reinforcing the narcissist's control. Macro-discards, in contrast, are the final breakups, the visible, dramatic endings. Often, the narcissist has already lined up a new source of supply before executing the macro-discard, reflecting their premeditated approach to extraction and manipulation. Whether the relationship ends because the survivor leaves or the narcissist discards them, the narcissist must always start over. For survivors, understanding this cycle is both clarifying and empowering. It reframes your experience not as a personal failure but as a confrontation with a profoundly manipulative personality. Psychologists emphasize that recognizing the narcissist's patterns allows survivors to reclaim autonomy, establish healthy boundaries, and protect emotional energy. You no longer have to chase the narrative they constructed, nor second-guess your intuition or dismiss red flags. Instead, you can see clearly. The narcissist operates according to a playbook of exploitation, and your wisdom and growth are the antidotes to their control. The narcissists need to start over, again and again, reveals the fragility of their inner world. They cannot sustain authenticity, accountability, or long-term attachment. Every new attempt at supply is a replication of past strategies, as they seek to extract what they cannot generate themselves. Psychologists describe this as the cycle of pathological narcissism, a continual process of hunting for validation, attention, and emotional fuel, always outside themselves. In contrast, the survivor's growth is cumulative and self-generated. With every experience, reflection, and boundary set, you accumulate wisdom that the narcissist will never attain. You ascend while they are trapped in repetition. Ultimately, recognizing the relentless need of the narcissist to start over underscores the importance of self-preservation and awareness. By understanding the mechanisms of hoovering, micro-discards, and macro-discards, survivors can disengage confidently, protect their energy, and refuse to participate in the narcissist's manipulative cycles. Psychologists stress that this knowledge is not merely academic. It is practical, actionable, and transformative. It allows you to reclaim the power that was once siphoned away, to live authentically, and to ensure that your emotional and psychological resources are preserved. The narcissist may endlessly seek new targets, but with insight, resilience, and clear boundaries, you will never have to be one of them again. There is a stage in the narcissist's life that many survivors never get to see directly, but psychologists warn it is both predictable and telling: the emergence of the aging narcissist. If youth once masked their manipulations, wrapped in charm, attractiveness, or social charisma, time inevitably strips away that facade. The aging narcissist still looks into the mirror and sees a reflection of who they were 20, 30, even 40 years ago. In their own minds, they believe they can still command attention with the same smile, the same flirtatious glance, the same air of self-assured confidence. But reality tells a harsher truth. Their charm is dulled, their social opportunities narrower, and most importantly, the people around them, family, partners, colleagues, have learned who they truly are and often want nothing more to do with them. Psychologists note that this stage can be particularly difficult for narcissists because it exposes the fundamental fragility of their self-concept. For decades, they built their identity upon external validation, admiration, control, and utility from others. As age progresses, those sources naturally diminish. Spouses leave, children grow distant, colleagues move on, and friends cut ties after repeated betrayals. What remains is the narcissist clinging desperately to what once was, replaying stories of their past, and trying to hold together the illusion of importance. Unlike emotionally mature adults, who find wisdom, connection, and growth in their later years, narcissists are left with nothing but memories of manipulation and bridges they themselves burned. This perpetual collapse is why narcissists must start over again and again, no matter their age. Sustained relationships require accountability, patience, and reciprocity, qualities narcissists fundamentally reject. Their language is not we, but me. They crave control, not companionship. They demand admiration, not authenticity. This is why every relationship they enter eventually follows the same trajectory: idealization, devaluation, discard, repeat. As psychologists explain, narcissists see others not as partners but as instruments, temporary tools for their own gratification. When these tools resist, break, or expose their flaws, the narcissist discards them and seeks new supply. For survivors, the period when you were tethered to the narcissist was the most dangerous. When you did not yet understand what was happening, when you ignored red flags and believed you could fix them, you were at your most vulnerable. Psychologists often call this the stage of trauma bonding, where cycles of abuse and reconciliation create powerful chemical and emotional dependency. The damage in this phase is subtle but relentless, often described as death by 1,000 cuts. Small betrayals, broken promises, gaslighting, and silent treatments accumulate until you are left doubting your worth, your perception, and even your reality. Many survivors describe looking the other way, convinced there was goodness buried deep inside the narcissist, believing that with enough love, patience, or sacrifice, things could change. But psychologists emphasize that this is an illusion. Narcissists are not seeking to heal, and there is no hidden reservoir of empathy waiting to be unlocked. Their patterns are fixed, and their aim is control, not connection. The aging narcissist, in particular, reveals the long-term consequences of this reality. By the time they reach later adulthood, they have left behind a trail of failed relationships, estranged children, abandoned friendships, and broken professional ties. Invitations stop arriving, communication lines are cut, and social circles shrink. Those who once tolerated or enabled their behavior eventually see the pattern and withdraw. And if you have not yet done so, you will too. Psychologists stress that survivors must embrace no contact as a non-negotiable step. Blocking them, cutting ties with their enablers, and closing every avenue of communication is not cruelty, it is survival. Without these boundaries, you remain susceptible to their hoovering, manipulation, and false promises. It is important to accept that narcissists do not change with age. In fact, many grow worse. The stakes feel higher for them as their options dwindle, which often intensifies their manipulative behaviors. Every reopened channel, every second chance given, only deepens the cycle of abuse. Survivors must therefore remain vigilant, because the narcissist's goal remains the same at any age: disruption, distraction, isolation, and control. Psychologists describe this as the central mission of narcissistic relating, not to build or nurture relationships, but to fracture and exploit them. For you, however, the truth is liberating. Once you understand the mechanisms at play, the endless cycle of starting over, the hollowness of their self-concept, the desperation of aging without authentic love, you can free yourself. You no longer need to be part of their cycle. Instead, you can redirect your energy toward healing, rebuilding your identity, and fostering relationships rooted in trust, mutual respect, and authenticity. Unlike the narcissist, whose life shrinks with time, yours can expand. With every boundary set and every insight gained, you reclaim not only your peace but also your power to create a future untethered from manipulation. One of the most insidious aspects of narcissistic behavior is how these individuals systematically erode the identity of those around them. Psychologists describe this as a gradual, almost imperceptible process of psychological attrition. A little chip here, a little cut there, repeated day after day, until the target is left hollowed out. Over time, victims often lose touch with their own sense of self, their desires, their boundaries, and even their voice. They become extensions of the narcissist, enmeshed in what mental health professionals call the narcissistic fog, a state of emotional and cognitive confusion that is disorienting, exhausting, and profoundly disempowering. In this fog, the victim often becomes an unpaid caretaker, a sounding board for criticism, an emotional sponge, a cook, chauffeur, cleaner, and a perpetual errand runner. Every task they perform feeds the narcissist's fragile sense of superiority, yet erodes their own autonomy. Psychologists emphasize that this pattern is not accidental. Narcissists are highly strategic and experienced. They have honed their manipulative skills over years or even decades, learning exactly how to extract power, admiration, and emotional energy from those around them. Each relationship functions as a laboratory in which they test tactics of control, influence, and psychological dominance. As the narcissist chips away at their partner, family member, or colleague, they do so with precision, often leaving the victim doubting their own perceptions. This creates a profound sense of disorientation. Am I too sensitive? Am I overreacting? Was it always this way? The fog makes clarity nearly impossible until distance and recovery begin. The culmination of this destructive pattern is almost inevitable. Relationships fracture under the weight of the narcissist's manipulation. Psychologists refer to this as the devaluation and discard stage, where the narcissist either abruptly ends the relationship or gradually withdraws while simultaneously blaming the other person for the breakdown. Victims are often left grappling with a complex mix of shame, confusion, and loss, compounded by gaslighting, smear campaigns, and the narcissist's relentless narrative that they alone are the victim. Children may be alienated, friends estranged, and personal accomplishments minimized or stolen, leaving the survivor not only emotionally drained but socially isolated as well. Yet, as overwhelming as these dynamics are, psychologists also point out an underlying law of balance in human behavior. Actions have consequences. The narcissist may temporarily succeed in dismantling lives, but their manipulations cannot override the larger forces of accountability, whether social, legal, or moral. For those who recognize this truth, it provides a profound sense of perspective and reassurance. While the narcissist's worldview is rigid and self-serving, the universe, psychologists might call it the broader moral or relational ecosystem, has mechanisms that ultimately restore equilibrium. The destructive energy the narcissist expends will eventually encounter limits beyond their control. This inability to face reality is at the core of why narcissists must repeatedly start over. Unlike the emotionally mature, who build long-term relationships based on trust, accountability, and reciprocity, narcissists cannot sustain genuine connection. Every cycle of manipulation leaves them further isolated, forcing them to seek new sources of supply over and over again. Their lives become a repetitive pattern: charm, idealize, manipulate, discard, and repeat. Psychologists describe this as a behavioral loop rooted in fragile self-esteem, where the narcissist's sense of importance is externally constructed and entirely dependent on exploitation. They cannot confront their own shortcomings, nor can they integrate self-reflection into their identity. The narcissist's self-perception is also remarkably rigid and unrealistic. They exist in a delusional narrative where they are powerful, important, and universally respected. This cognitive rigidity explains why they appropriate the work, ideas, and achievements of others, assuming no one will notice. They live in a kind of scripted reality, where authenticity is irrelevant and truth is whatever sustains their illusion of superiority. Psychologists note that this pattern of chronic deception and self-aggrandizement is emotionally and cognitively exhausting for the narcissist themselves, yet they are compelled to maintain it because they cannot exist psychologically without external validation. For the survivor, understanding this cycle is both liberating and clarifying. Recognizing that the narcissist's behaviors, whether subtle micromanipulations or overt discards, are repetitive and predictable allows one to reclaim personal power. Recovery is not merely emotional, it is strategic. Boundaries, no contact, and conscious refusal to participate in the narcissist's control mechanisms are essential. Psychologists emphasize that each act of self-preservation, whether it's blocking contact, resisting the hoovering attempts, or restoring one's own routines, is a critical step in regaining identity, autonomy, and peace of mind. Ultimately, the narcissist's life is a cautionary tale of unsustainable self-obsession. They cannot grow, they cannot build, and they cannot truly connect. The survivor, in contrast, can reclaim authenticity, cultivate resilience, and foster genuine relationships. The difference lies in the capacity for self-reflection, accountability, and compassion, qualities the narcissist will never develop. By understanding the patterns, the strategies, and the psychological mechanisms at play, survivors gain clarity, strength, and freedom, leaving the cycle of manipulation behind while the narcissist continues to endlessly start over, trapped in a world of their own making.